right, welcome back to the Unsecurity Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Nye. You can see this is not Oscar with me. Oscar is out doing the speaking circuit again. Not sure exactly what he's doing this time because he's been doing a lot of talking lately. So with me, I have Megan Larkins, who is our manager of consulting.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. We don't care about titles inside the company so much. It's like, who do I ask for what? Okay.
The go-to, yeah, one of the go-to people.
Go-to people. So welcome, Megan. Thank you for joining us today. So I guess we'll start with just, tell us a little bit, what is managing the consulting team at FRSecure besides going, Brad, quit coming up with ideas that you don't document?
Stop squirreling and focus.
There may be some of that.
Maybe just a little bit. Well, I'll say it's evolving a lot because we're growing a lot, and this has been my first role as a manager, so it's been a learning process for me, and also I guess it's worked out nicely since our team has been growing and our company maturing throughout the process, because I think I was looking back and I've been manager for just a little bit over 2 years now. It feels like it hasn't been that long, and yet at the same time, it's hard to believe it's only been that long at the same time. I think, I got a chance to talk at the Hacks and Hops only last week and reflected, like, one of the challenges is trying to just kind of take care of everybody and make sure that everyone is kind of where they feel comfortable doing the work that they want, getting to grow where they want, and just kind of be happy in their jobs. I think that's part of it, as well as just like finding effective places for everyone to be. At FRSecure, we focus on people, and on the traction thing, it's kind of like right people, right seats. So sometimes you have an awesome person who can be awesome, but maybe they're not just not quite in the right place or in quite the right role. So sometimes, just like with our customers, trying to match people up, find that right fit, understand how they work, but also just, like I said, as myself, a growing leader, understand now that I get to kind of define what I do, be like, where will I be most effective and where should I be using other people to do those things? So I know, especially right now, I feel like this year I've been evaluating, like, what can I pass over to Brad and other team leads on the consulting team, and feeling like we're about at another point of evolution where I kind of, again, step back a little further and be like, hey, now you guys can take this and run with this more. And I'll be able to kind of watch as the evil overlord.
There you go.
And just watch things and kind of, keep a pulse on things instead of being intimately involved in everything. And that's hard because I like to do stuff too, but it's like, sometimes, especially when I start getting requests from everywhere, it's like, I don't have time to do the thing anymore. I just need to tell someone else to do it.
Yeah, no, what's been fun is working with you in that, granted, the team was maybe a third the size, but I did, I held that same role at one point, and so hopefully I've been able to help you out with that. But also watching you kind of struggle makes me go, oh, thank God it's not just me. There's definitely things where you're like, and it's not, I don't know, it's just hard. It's hard to quantify some of the stuff we do, with consulting. So it's like, how do we do this? How do we, and to see you having a completely different thought process of kind of where you're coming from and having the same challenges makes me feel better. So that helps you. It
is a challenge. And I think one of the challenges too with the kind of point of growth that we're at is we've gone from that smaller environment where it was just kind of like pretty free flow, like basically as long as you're providing the service to the customer, it doesn't really matter how you do it, to now our team is large enough and we're trying to train people to do those things and do them in a more consistent way, so that we know that what we're selling is at least somewhat consistent to what we're selling is consistent to what we're actually doing, and then our different team members are doing it at least somewhat consistently, with their own personality, their own experience and background on that. So I know I've just learned a lot, but continue to learn, like, where do we kind of hold the line and say this needs to be consistent across the board versus giving people the individual freedom to kind of use their knowledge, their experience, their personality to work with that individual customer, that individual case to do what's best for them.
In translation for the readers or for the listeners, that means, okay, Brad, no, quit doing it your way and follow the rules.
Brad, there's a process. Follow it.
That may have been said more than once.
Maybe just a few times. I mean, it's a little harder when you go from one way and, hey, you can't just do it your own way anymore.
My way works for me.
Yeah.
No, but it is fun to like I said, work with you because you do come with such a different mindset. I think we, like you said, a little bit more squirrely. Like, you're like, okay, great, show me how that works. Okay, here are the steps, and then you're like, and I'm like, no, that's how you do it. How do we get somebody else to do those 25 steps you showed me in like 3 because you just skipped over everything because it's just what you did.
What about all the ifs, ands, or buts in between?
And like, just deal with them as they come up. No.
Yeah. Well, I know one thing I think we both got a kick out of earlier the year when we were doing some of the personality profiles, because we know that you and I have always worked really well together, was to be like how opposite end of the spectrum we were. And then you read the profile and it's like, oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, I am much more or less risk taker and more methodical and being like, okay, what if this, and it needs to go this way. And you're much more like kind of risk taking, able to jump out in front of something and be like, let's just make it work. And so then just trying to like find the middle ground for the team of taking chances, doing new things, but also documenting it and making sure it's structured so we can actually repeat it.
Your work has definitely benefited the team. So
yeah, there's less people saying, what am I supposed to do? At least some of the time.
Well, and it's also tough to, because, I've been here over 7 years now, and when I started, it really was just figure it out, make it work.
Yeah.
And we hired people that could figure it out and make it work. Well, there's only so many of those people out there. Let's be realistic. So, we've gone from a team when I was kind of in your position of I didn't have to worry about that. I mean, you and Ryan and Sean and Lori and some of these that really senior people that it was just like, hey, do this, and didn't have to worry about it. And not to say that the people we have now aren't extremely talented, they're just not as experienced. And there's just no replacement for experience.
Yeah. Well, that's one of our objectives of growing our team too, is like, not only in the industry do you see a lot of younger people trying to enter the industry of information security, and it's like, if the bar is so high that you can't ever bring in any new people, then we're going to run out of people. So we kind of have to lower the bar and provide more training so that we can bring people up to speed. And that's part of the work that I've been doing right now is try to kind of figure out what's that learning roadmap look like, because there's that balance of bringing in more junior people, leveling them up, and still meeting the expectations of experience with the customer too. So where do we kind of draw the line of what services can they do with less experience versus where do we need that more senior person? And that's kind of delicate balance at times.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, it is. And I think, the younger people, less experienced that we brought in, I've been blown away by like their hunger and how quickly they're picking this up, and so it's great to see, and it's energizing, having been around far longer than I want to admit, to see like that next group coming in and growing and building off of what you've put into place. And so it's fun.
Yeah. It's a pleasure.
So you mentioned you were on a panel at Hacks and Hops. That was last week.
Yep.
Do you do I know you did a presentation on our FRSecure's InfoSec report, state of InfoSec. How much public speaking do you do? Is it, different from like Oscar, myself, coming from the female perspective as opposed to a male? Like, how are you approach, is there any difference that you can see or?
Um, Not that I've seen so far, other than I think just there are opportunities where I don't know. Yeah, I mean, so far the inquiries that have come my way recently, because it's really only been like within the last month and a half that I've started to do a little bit more of that beyond kind of the customer engagement training. Um, I guess prior to that, I had one or two unique experiences speaking that was specifically like women driven, like encouraging women to get into the industry of cybersecurity and talking about how to get into it, or at least how I got into it and how other women get into it, and or just even getting into the field in general for the younger audience. Um, and kind of talking about the different paths into information security. So I've done one or two presentations like that, I think last year. And then this year, kind of, yeah, I hadn't done any speaking, I don't think, or at least not that I'm remembering right now until kind of those recent ones, which was more like, hey, we just need somebody to fill a hole. So can you do this? It's like, well, sure. Okay, I can do that. So,
Awesome.
yeah, being pretty introverted and definitely a very quiet person growing up, it kind of surprises me still that I feel comfortable speaking in front of an audience. But I do. It doesn't bother me too much. I need to prepare somewhat. A panel is different. You can't really prepare for that. But yeah, it's good.
That's good. And then I know you mentioned you're mentoring someone. Do you want to talk about like what that process is? What does that mean to you as a mentor?
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I've been working with a gal, Abby, kind of just introduced to her through the team, and it's been really exciting to kind of just have an opportunity to mentor another growing leader. She's not in information security specifically, but she's a developing female lady, leader in IT, and so just having an opportunity to kind of help her work through problems and challenges. And it's been an awesome experience so far. Likewise, she and I, we have some similarities, but also see different challenges that we come up being a leader in IT differently. And so I think for the most part, like it's been really rewarding because I can just share what I've seen and done. And she's usually thrilled. She's like, oh my God, I've never thought about it that way. That's so helpful. And, I feel like I didn't do much. And so I think that part is really cool. And the other part that's awesome about it is just having those conversations and hearing how she's working through things and even getting to explain how I'm working through things and kind of learning from her as well through that. So, yeah, we've been trying to remember when we started, if it was at the beginning of the year or if we're coming up on a year. But yeah, it's been going well. We got an opportunity to meet up at the Secure 360 event
Nice.
earlier in the year, and then one of my talks recently, she came and sat in on that too. So yeah, it's kind of fun. And I just started meeting with the one of the local schools doing like their mentorship
Mhm.
program too, and that one will be a little more interesting because or challenging maybe because it's not necessarily information security related. So it's like a high school gal that's interested in kind of global business. And I'm
Oh,
kind of like,
interesting.
okay, that's interesting because that's kind of out of my scope and world of things. But to try and figure out how I can bring value to her in that mentorship relationship.
That's very cool. I know I had done the high school mentoring before the pandemic, and then everything just shut down. And
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I should probably do that. So looking at mentor, being a mentor, did you have a mentor coming up in your career? Did you, or like, at what point did you find a mentor? Have you found a mentor?
I say FRSecure has been my mentors. I've had like not really any strong um, single mentor in my life until kind of coming here and just getting to work with this great team, like learning from you and from Lori and Sean and Ryan and everybody on our team that's been doing IT information security longer and in more depth than I have. I had a couple like female leaders in my life and even a male leader in my life, kind of at previous roles and situations where kind of general mentoring or just exampling, kind of just helping build help me in some way or other feel confident and kind of get a vision of who I wanted to be as a leader. So I think I had a couple good examples of a leader. They weren't necessarily like one-on-one mentoring, but I learned things through them and how they operated. And sometimes in the contrast too, it's like, okay, that is not what I want to do or how I ever want to be managed again. That sucked.
Yeah, I think we've all had those that are like,
Right, right. But I know before I came to FRSecure, I was just I was learning on the job, IT and security, trying to seek out those certifications, and working alone because I was an IT department of one, and I knew I really wanted that mentoring, that collaboration that came from a team. And so I've been really glad to find that and then be able to contribute to that at FRSecure.
very cool. Do you think, and this is a leading question a little bit because I have my own answer to this, but do you think not having like a strong mentor earlier in your career, is that part of why you're willing to, you're mentoring this, the Abby and the high school student? Is that drive? Does that have any part of that drive?
Um, Definitely driving it is the desire to kind of help just provide opportunity and confidence and clarity, I think, because I know, um, trying to think, in my own career, I felt like it was kind of like I never looked too big picture. It was kind of like one step at a time, just finding my way, what seemed possible. And I didn't have a long term vision for what was possible. I kind of just explored it. And that worked for me, but it doesn't work for everybody. And there were definitely those moments of, where am I going to get with this? Like, how am I going to build a career around this of things that I want to do? And especially once I got to FRSecure, I finally felt like secure in my role, kind of knowing that I had a path forward that I felt comfortable and, safe about. Like, I didn't have to worry that if I lost my job, I'm going to lose, tens of thousands of dollars from my salary or that I can afford to feed my family and take care of them and things like that. But I think a lot of it just comes from, for me, even hearing the experience of especially other women and other just like minorities or other people trying to get into information security or into just a solid uh, job career where they feel confident, where they feel happy to work in general, kind of to, it's like not quite like if I can do it, anyone can do it, because I know that's not the case. Like I know I've had advantages and definitely like, I got to go to college and I did manage to have, I had enough money to kind of explore things throughout that. I didn't have to take significant like financial chances along the way. But at the same time, like I started in art and I ended up here and that, lots of people have made that journey. And so I think for me, a lot of it is encouraging people to try things and let you know that there's not like one magic way to do it. And it is possible. You just kind of have to set your mind at it and work at it and find your avenue. It's not every path. No two paths look identical. So
Yeah, yeah.
I believe you.
I said that because I didn't really have a mentor until I was probably almost 15 years into my career,
Mm-hmm.
and the difference having that person who's been there, done that, and looking back and going, oh my gosh, things could have been so much different. Not that I'm complaining by any means, but just going,
Right.
I would have had to like go through a lot less heartache, headache, stress if I'd known it. So to me, that is a big part of like doing the mentor program and
Yeah.
all the outreach and stuff that I do is trying to be there for people because like, hey, if I can help somebody avoid a pitfall that I've gone through, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. Yeah. I think especially when you don't know the industry, you don't know the working world that you're trying to get into, it's really intimidating. Um, I mean, even when I was trying to get into some of the art fields, yeah, it just felt so unattainable at times. And, I ended up in this field and I'm really happy here. At the same time, I started out exploring animation arts. And if I had had a mentor in that, I could have had potentially a very different looking career, but same kind of feeling. It's like, how do you even get in? What does it even look like to have these jobs? What do I need to do to
Mm-hmm.
get into that place? And so there is probably a certain amount of that too, because there's just a lot of uncertainty and finding my way and very try something, see what works, and then just keep following it. And I just feel very grateful that I've found my way here, and things are good.
One of the things that I think we do a really good job at here is hiring the person, not necessarily the skill set, right? And that's something that I know I personally have always tried to look at is, all right, I may ask you, especially when I was in IT and hiring, I'm going to ask you a really, really hard question. I don't care if you get it right or not. I want to see how you think about it. What is your thought process? What are you troubleshooting? Where are you going? Because there are things you can teach. There are certain things you just can't teach. And if you have those intangibles, okay, great. Let's focus on the right fit and we can teach you technology. So what if you troubleshot something wrong? Well, if the thought process I liked it, awesome.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I'm pretty sure I'm a product of that because, I wasn't doing information security when you guys hired me. So, but I think I remember you saying that same thing. It's like that's how I operated in IT. I was learning on it, figuring it out, following the thought process, studying it up. I'm pretty sure my answer about the most important information security to matter was not the reason I got hired.
I'll be honest, I don't have any clue what you said. Awesome. Well, we'll transition here, and you brought this to my attention. It's Proofpoint's.
Yeah.
Let me pull it up here. I had it up, and there it is. Proofpoint's 2023 Voice of the CISO report. And so they have, 6 chapters? Chapter 1, back to business as usual. Chapter 2, protecting people. Chapter 3, defending data. Chapter 4, building a defense to fight on every front. Chapter 5, boards and CISOs, closer to the same page. Chapter 6, life as a CISO in the crosshairs, burned out and under a microscope. And, we can hit on this very high level. That for the most part, I agreed with a lot of what was in here. We just put out, and I actually have it right here in front of me, our 2023 InfoSec report, which was built off of 55-ish incidents and 400 some odd validated assessments we did. And so we have hard facts of validated independent third-party assessments. And this was Proofpoint interviewing CISOs. They don't say the size. It just says companies larger than 200. I know ours was 50 to 2,500 in roughly. So I'm going to assume overall probably not a hugely different size enough to make a difference. They did interview significantly more, but it was interviews versus validation. So I'm just going to hit on the high levels on each of these, and then I want to get your take very quickly. So back to chapter 1, back to business as usual. And the big point out of this is 68% of CISOs feel their organization is at risk of experiencing a material cyber attack in the next 12 months. 25% saying the risk is very likely. When I read that, my gut was like, yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that I saw interesting here was that we're back to, we're escalating levels. I think one of the things they pointed out is like post-pandemic, immediately post-pandemic. So last year, organizations were quite a bit more confident that they wouldn't have a material cyber attack within the year, which I just found kind of fascinating. I mean, it wasn't the case everywhere. It looks like France was more skeptical last year than they are this year, but by and large, most organizations are feeling that they're as much at risk or more at risk than they were 2 years prior in 2021, when we were going through so much evolution and change and seeing the kind of cyber impacts and implications, and that no, attackers won't play nice just because a world pandemic is going on. They're going to take advantage of it, and all of the remote work shifts and all of that. And now we're kind of back to, kind of like because they were even saying 2021, the average level of expecting that they would experience an attack was 64%. Now it's 68%. So it is actually slightly elevated from what it was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And just what it was highlighting, like the supply chain attacks, the different kinds of attacks and sophistication of attacks that we're seeing. And, I think a lot of it comes back to what I hear us say over and over again, it kind of comes back to basics. Like a lot of it, it's not new problems, it's just new technology for the most part.
Yeah. The four major threats that they said were email fraud at 33%, insider threats 30%, cloud account compromise 29%, and DDoS attacks 29%. Which, yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah.
You mentioned supply chain vendor risk management. That was at 27%, and we're running up a little bit tight on time, so we'll go through these other ones quickly because I definitely want to talk about that one.
Okay,
But
yes.
Chapter 2, protecting the people, cybersecurity cornerstone. 60% of CISOs consider human error to be their organization's biggest vulnerability. I agree that should be probably higher, but
Yeah.
To get to at least say 60% saying that, and what impressed me was 67% of board of directors said that.
Right.
So people are finally coming around. Boards are finally coming around to what we've been preaching of like, hey, this is your weakest link. Hello. So that's a positive, but I think overall I agreed with what we saw in that chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the only thing that kind of concerns me with the way that it's presented here is, are they accepting responsibility for that human being the weakest link? Because I kind of get the sense lately that it's like, oh, well, the user's to blame and it's just the employee and they don't get it. But whose responsibility is it to educate those users, employees, and make sure that they do get it? They do understand the weight of their responsibility as a element of that organization. And I'm not sure if those lines are always connecting.
I would probably agree with you that they're not.
They'd rather find someone to blame.
Yeah. Well, you didn't do your job. You didn't give me funding or people
Did you
to do
tell
my
me
job.
what the job was?
Right? Yeah. What is my job? Chapter 3, defending data. They said 63%. These are global averages, so just so everyone knows, I think this was across 16 countries. 63% of global CISOs say their organizations have dealt with a material loss of sensitive information. Again, sadly, that seems like it should be high, but it's not.
Yeah, it feels right. Because, I mean, if you're saying they're not, well, I guess this is material loss of sensitive information. So it's more than just a temporary breached email account where they immediately shut it off and nothing was lost. Though even a temporary email breach can be pretty significant because usually the first thing the attacker does is download the whole mailbox. But yeah, I think that's good awareness. But yeah, sadly not surprising.
No. And we'll make sure there's a link to get this. I think you have to sign up for an email or something, but
yeah, you do have to give your name and email.
Let's see. Dealing with data loss. All right. Chapter 4. So we'll talk here for a few minutes. Building a defense to fight on every front. And this is where I think we have a huge disconnect from self-assessment to what we see in the real world. Global average, 64% of CISOs said their organization has appropriate controls in place to mitigate supply chain attack or chain risk. I'm sorry. No, it's not what we found. So out of our hard data, what we found is only 45% of the 400 some odd companies we did a validated assessment, 45% maintain an inventory of all vendors, including the information security risk requirements. Well, you can't have a appropriate control in place if 55% don't even have a list of their vendors. So I already have a problem with this. Secondly, we found only 36% of vendors and service providers are classified by the risk they pose to the organization. Well, we're trending in the wrong way versus what people think they have.
Right.
And then only 30% document and assess the vendors and service providers for risk annually. How can you possibly have appropriate controls and say 64%? And to be honest, the highest is like almost 80% in the UK, down to Germany, I think is 50, and I can't tell what the last one is.
I know, I'm trying to see what that is too.
But they're at 48%. So, when you look at the global average, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, no, wait. I read that wrong. 10 of the 16 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Yeah, like
8,
9 or 10 of the
9.
16.
9 out of 16 say they are above the global average of 64%, but yet when we do validated assessments, I would say only 30%.
Right. Yeah,
You know,
30% of them actually have
and
the right things in place to have an effective program where they know who their vendors are, they're classifying so they know what risk they pose, and then they're potentially re-reviewing it on an annual or some other regular basis.
and
Which, I mean, vendors change frequently. You just think of our tiny little organization of 100
right,
employees. We've probably changed at least 5 vendors just this year. So,
right, and to be honest, I've been really impressed with our sales team because I like to pick on sales and marketing just because they're easy targets, but they've actually done a phenomenal job of saying, "Hey, we've looked at these. We want to look at these 3 vendors for this service. What are the next steps?" And actually following the steps.
mhm.
Let's get them in. Let's do an assessment prior to actually onboarding them or agreeing to anything, and understanding what the risk is. That's the way to do it.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
thing that really scared me the most, or like bothers me the most, is 61% are basically relying on cyber insurance to recover losses incurred. And to me, that goes back to cyber insurance is not an incident response plan. And they're saying, well, it's a vendor, we'll just cover insurance. That it's still your data. You're still
Yeah,
responsible for it. Like
right.
that is so wrong. Oh, that really bothers me.
Yeah, well, and I think as you've been pointing out and kind of bringing to our team's attention lately too, like now the government entities, the regulations, the uh, authorities over how people should be running their information security programs are starting to tee into that and say, hey, it is your responsibility to hold your vendors accountable and actually make sure that you pick vendors and work with vendors and know the risks that they pose and how you're going to interact with those. I know just, starting to work in our vendor risk management program, I think one of the frustrations that I was venting to someone just earlier today is still that there's not an easy button to that. Like
No,
we can take our service and we can help you assess those vendors, understand the risk. It's still the organization, the one with the relationship with that vendor that has to read our report, understand what is being said, and then talk to that vendor and tell them, here's what we aren't comfortable with. We don't feel comfortable with you hosting, managing, operating with our data, our processes, interacting with us while you have these gaps in place. We need you to fix it, or else we are going to have to find someone else. And sometimes it's like we're trying to be asked and easy buttoning that conversation, just skipping over it entirely. It's like, no,
right?
we can't talk to your vendor for you. These
Well,
are your choices,
it,
your decisions to make.
right. You're their client. Like,
Yeah,
why would you be afraid to ask them to do something that you need?
right. Yeah.
All right. Running a little over, but that's okay. I think this is a good conversation. So, Chapter 5, boards and CISOs closer to the same page. 62% of CISOs say their board sees eye to eye to them on the issue of cybersecurity, which is up from 51% in 2022. To me, I think that aligns almost directly to what's the risk of
Mm-hmm.
a cyber attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we saw 2022 to 2023 that the boards even jumped, the CISOs jumped. Now we're seeing that closer alignment. So that's good to see.
Yeah.
Interesting that boards said 69% that they see eye to eye with the CISO. So there is a little bit of a disconnect there with boards going, yeah, we're good. And CISO's going, I need help. But it's a
Yeah.
positive that
It's positive that it is ticking in the right direction. I think the report does a good job of, kind of pointing out that, yeah, it makes sense that the boards are going to feel a little bit more confident because it's the CISO's responsibility to bring them that information. So if they're feeling confident in the information their CISO is providing, then of course they're going to trust it. They don't know what the CISO is maybe not telling them and might be reserving some doubts around, or maybe even knowing that how they need to spin the conversation in order to make it move forward and not get stuck somewhere. So maybe they're holding on to a few things that they really just need to find a way to more effectively
or
communicate with that board.
I wonder how much of it too is not, it goes back to that communication gap.
Mm-hmm.
The board doesn't understand what the CISO is saying. So they're like, cool, we're good.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, chapter 6, life as a CISO in the crosshairs, burned out under the microscope. Yeah, 61% of CISOs agree that there are excessive expectations on the CISO or CSO.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually lower than I expected it to
Is it?
be
Yeah.
totally honest.
That's
Um,
true with the amount of highlights that we've heard of, CISOs not staying in the role more than, what is it, 2 years,
yep,
and typically having a lot of turnover, which that's really expensive for companies to have that level of a leader changing that frequently.
yep. And, 60% of CISOs agreed they've experienced burnout in the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how, I mean, 61, 60, I guess that's pretty much dead on. That would explain why.
Right.
So overall, I think we agree with a lot of what they found. Um, that being said, there are definitely, I think it really, especially supply chain, but a lot of this, it really comes back to your self view, a self assessment. What's the difference between a self assessment and an independent third party coming in and saying, yeah, here's where it really is. And I know, this is our first InfoSec report, and I know Oscar and I have had some really good conversations about, okay, now where do we take it from here? And one of the things we're looking at is self-assessed versus validated,
Mm-hmm.
and looking at what those differences are, and having some data around that. And I think that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out with how the voice of the CISO comes out. So,
Yeah. Well, I know just from our view into the security studio system, you can see, yeah, vendor self assessments versus, or organization self assessments versus, yeah, the third party assessment. You're going to gloss over some things, especially in a vendor assessment when you're reporting to it. You want to go take that more optimistic perspective
right,
versus, especially if we're doing a third party assessment, we try to take a very open approach. Like, you're not going to get value out of this assessment if you're not honest with us. We're not auditors. There's no benefit to hiding the truth. Like, we want to identify what your gaps are so that you can improve them and approach them. You can't fix what you don't know is broken.
absolutely.
Um, so just a different perspective and set of expectations between those two. But yeah, I liked the report. Similar styles. I mean, they did say these are CISOs, so I'm going to assume some of these organizations are a little bit more mature, so that might account for some of those differences and some of those things where we feel like maybe the impact's a little bit different in the broader scope of the organizations we
Mhm.
work with. These organizations at least have a named person assigned
Yeah,
to that role, which not all the organizations we work with do, but yeah, it's good to see and also to understand the pressures that those CISOs are facing, and for organizations to kind of understand like that turnover is not going to improve if you are asking your CISO to take personal liability for your security program,
right.
and they have less resources to do it than ever, and the threats, the expectations on them are growing.
Yeah,
So
we didn't have a breach last year, so we don't need that much money.
well,
Uh,
yeah, we're not making money from that information security program, so we can cut that budget, right?
right.
Well, sure, but what about losing money and having a halt to all of your operations when something bad goes wrong? So, yeah, in the end, risk management.
So awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and this was a fun conversation. I hope our listeners got something out of it. So I did warn you. We do a shout out at the end. So do you have a
Oh,
shout out for anyone?
let's see. I didn't give it a lot of thought, but I think I want to give a shout out to April Meyer just because I've had an opportunity to kind of overlap with her in a number of customer situations lately. And I think she's just not only grown a lot in the last kind of year or so, but I can see how much like passion and enthusiasm she's bringing to each of her VCSOs. Asking, she's one of those that I think is really uh, being a strong representative of our uh, consultants to our customers and saying, am I being of value to you, and continuing to ask that. Sometimes when you're on a call regularly with someone, and especially if they're not asking things of you all the time, it can be easy to be complacent. But I think she's really kind of setting a high bar there with expectations for our customers.
Yeah, I agree. I've really enjoyed watching her grow over the last
Mm-hmm.
couple of years, and
Yeah.
Get more confidence. I'm going to give a shout out to our marketing team for Hacks and Hops, and also for all the speakers, including yourself. I thought everybody did a really good job. It was a fun time at the Target Center, and got to shoot
Yeah.
some hoops afterwards on the Timberwolves floor, and so shout
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
to
I
them.
know. But yeah, that's true. Big kudos to our marketing team for that. That was a phenomenal event. And yeah, I think we'll have more of those in the future.
Yep. So thank you to all our listeners, and you'll have to tune in next week to see if Oscar is back or he's traveling again.
That's right. Or if he's stuck with me or someone else again.
Right? I'll find somebody else.
Good filling in for Oscar. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.